Hey, what's happening, guys? So I got a question from Doom3XD or D7OOM3XD. If I'm the age of 14, what is the best MMA for self-defense? For me, if I want to fight a bully at school and the bully is taller than me. You know, when I was in high school, I was on the football team, freshman year as well as sophomore year. So freshman football as well as JV. Within the football team, there would be some level of rivalry and whatnot. I remember one time I kind of got into it with one of the other Korean guys. He was about my height, my size. We were both a little bit big. Just to kind of give you an idea of what kind of height and size. For a freshman, sophomore, usually around the age of 13, 14, which is around the age that you're at, I was already almost 6 feet tall and about 175-esque pounds. The other Korean kid was about the same height, maybe an inch or two shorter, but around the same weight. So now both of us also had experience in martial arts. At the time, I was in karate, and within that style of karate that we were doing is Kyokushin karate, and but that it was more of a hybrid sparring style where they took elements from Kyokushin as well as Muay Thai to kind of give you karate Muay Thai style kickboxing sparring experience. And there was also some of that traditional karate style self-defense, everything from like wrist locks to arm bars to all of that. But one thing that I hadn't trained in, and the curriculum was such that this training would come later, which was the element of grappling. So I remember I got into it, as a couple of punks typically are. They get into each other's face, and the next thing I knew, I'm on my back. And what he basically did was he just took me down, right? He took me down, tripped my leg. I think he did like a single leg heel pick or something, and I was on my back. And I remember talking to Sensei about the experience. And he basically said, yeah, you got taken down. But the key lesson that was communicated to me was like, look, if you want to avoid embarrassment in terms of whether it be altercations and whatnot, the number one thing that you can do is to avoid the conflict altogether. There's no point, there's no need in getting into a fight. If you can avoid it. Now, obviously, if you've done what you can to avoid the situation, to avoid the conflict, there's police sirens. But if you've done everything that you can to avoid the conflict, then yes, you need to do what you need to do to defend yourself. And in almost any kind of scenario, if it's a one-on-one scenario, where you're being bullied by someone, you're being harassed, you're being abused by a single individual, then if you can't remove yourself from that situation, then your best bet would probably be to avoid striking altogether. Like, striking is something that you shouldn't have to do. And this is why some of the, historically, any kind of grappling art will typically dominate any striking art, all things being equal. Right? So if you take an untrained person in the sense of they're trained in striking, but they have no grappling ability. You take somebody who is trained in grappling, has no striking ability, 90 times out of 100, at least, the person who has grappling ability will subdue the striker almost every time. And so now, to be a well-rounded fighter, to have a good rounding in self-defense, then yes, it helps to be able to have proficiency, have the fundamentals down in both your striking with your hands and your feet as well as grappling. But if you had to learn one first, through my experience, I would always advise and I would always recommend learn a form of grappling. If that grappling, and if you're in high school, if you have a wrestling team, join the wrestling team if you can. If you have any, Jiu-Jitsu schools, whether it be Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or if you have any wrestling academies, or any kind of anything that, or even Judo, right? Any kind of grappling art that you can get proficient in, spend at least a couple of years training. And that will give you the foundational situation to avoid even striking. And at the same time, it gives you the ability to control your opponent while in the end, nobody necessarily needing to go to the hospital. Because as you grow older, you're 14 years old now, right? I don't know how it is from state to state. Some states, you are considered an adult legally before other states. But typically, like if you're 14, 4 years, by the time you finish high school, or even before you finish high school, you're gonna be an adult. And so for that reason, I would seriously consider if you ever find yourself in a conflict situation, you don't want to be situated where you have to go to court, right? But yeah, if you're trying to stand up to a bully, I would say number one, avoid the individual, avoid the situations that put you there. But if everything is unavoidable, you've made it clear, like, look, man, I don't want any trouble. I don't want to fight. And they're physically harassing you, they're physically abusing you, and they're a danger to you and those around you, then yes, you have to defend yourself. And one of the best ways to go about that is some form of grappling. One of the most common forms is Jiu-Jitsu, right? You have Jiu-Jitsu with the gi, you have Jiu-Jitsu without the gi. Some schools teach both, some schools specialize in one or the other. Or you have wrestling, or you have Judo. I would say start there. Spend at least a couple of years. And once you got the fundamentals down, then learn some basic striking. Basic striking in terms of a few punches and a few kicks. Again, not the kind of punches and kicks that break bricks, right? Those are great. I've trained in that. I trained in that first, but you don't want to smash somebody's face in, right? Like that's not going to help anybody. It's good for self-confidence. It's good for discipline. It's all of that good stuff. And to kind of give you just a closing idea, that if you look at the samurai, right, how did they learn their martial art, right? They're very similar to the American military style today, right? From back in the day, they started with, they had their artillery, they had the cannons, they had their long-range muskets, really. They had rifles. So, in fact, it was the gunpowder revolution that led to their rise within the Japanese archipelago. And after those were exhausted, they went into their classic long-range weapons, their bow and arrow, short-range and long-range bow and arrows. And then they went to their swords and their knives. And then once all of that was gone, they resorted to grappling. They didn't, because most of the time these guys were armored. Striking somebody with your hands and feet is not necessarily going to help. But if you can subdue them, bring them down, and hold them down and control them until reinforcements and help arrive, that was valuable. And so I'll leave you with that. I hope you find this of help, and let me know if if you have anything else, if there's anything else that I could help you with. But my advice is literally just that. Do your best to avoid the conflict, but if you have to defend yourself, and if it's just one-on-one, taking the individual down to the ground will probably be your best idea. That way you minimize the harm to both yourself and the one who's harassing you. I hope that helps. Leave me a question in the comments below if you have anything else. With that, stay safe.